Hey everyone, this is Eddie Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to episode 178 of SportsSpeak Live, powered by SeatGeek. Use the promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase. It's concert season, baseball season. Perfect time to take advantage of that. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We got Ryan Minneker stopping by as well. Great to have him here on a bit of short notice for this 178th edition of SportsSpeak. We're going to bounce around all four major sports today because there's a storyline in each of them that I want to hit on. We're going to start here first with the Stanley Cup Finals. It's disappointing both the NHL and the NBA right now because the playoffs, obviously so much hype going on. There's constant action when they're both happening at the same time, especially when you have 7-game series. But you get down to the finals, which were both intriguing matchups. And right now you have both the Florida Panthers and Boston Celtics on the brink of sweeps, both up 3-0 in their respective series. Ryan, this Panthers team we know is good, led by Matt Tkachuk and Bobby in goal, and there's so much surrounding talent on that roster as well. And they have the experience. They played in the Stanley Cup final last year. But, you know, putting the curses aside, like we know about the President's Cup curse and the Rangers don't make it to the finals. We know about the Canada curse, which we talked about on the show last week. And again, a Canadian team on the brink of losing the Stanley Cup final. Despite those, are you surprised at all by just how dominant the Panthers have looked so far in these Stanley Cup finals?
No, I'm not surprised. I think going back to the Eastern Conference and Western Conference finals, I think, of course the Rangers lost in 6, so yeah, they weren't the right choice for the finals. But I don't think I feel like the Western Conference had a better, host. I'd say. I don't think Edmonton was the best of the West, but hey, they beat all the West teams and they made it to the finals. But now they're getting swept. Most likely going to get swept. Do the Edmonton Oilers have fight in them? Yes. Do I think Game 4 is going to be easy for the Panthers? No. But, the Panthers have went out these 3 games. I think the first game they shut them out. The second game might have been close. I know Game 3 was 4-3 last night. Edmonton's got a day of rest. They have to, whatever they've been doing, they have to do something different because Mike Skinner, it might be Jeff Skinner. I'm sorry. I'm not sure. Skinner had to be better. They said Skinner had to be better than Shesterkin, and he has not been better than Shesterkin at all. I think, the defense, Edmonton's defense needs to step up in this Game 4 if they want to stay alive because you can't. You've seen it already. The Panthers can put up 4 goals and win the game easily. So, Edmonton's got to be quick. They got to be quick. They got to forecheck 100% of the time. They got to. I don't know. I don't know what Edmonton has to do because this Panther team just looks too good. It just looked too good.
Yeah, and one thing Minneker just brought up too, real quick, Eddie, that I think that we talked about on last episode, especially what has impressed me throughout this series about Florida in particular. And another thing, to be honest with you, that I totally failed to mention on last episode is you're also bringing a team that's motivated, that already has this Stanley Cup experience, that is motivated to wanting to get to a championship level. But what I think the big thing is as well is that you look at where they struggled the regular season. I talked about penalties, second most penalized team. But yet when you look at goaltender play and what you are seeing from Florida this entire postseason, as well as the entire season, is spectacular because despite being put in deficits, put on 5-on-4s, 5-on-3s, whatever it is, they continue to not allow pucks in net. And again, when we talk about the NHL, when we talk about the Stanley Cup, goalies win you championships, just like how we talk about the NFL. Defense can win you Super Bowls. Pitching in baseball can win you championships when it's on, when it matters. And for the Oilers, I thought having a team that was very dominant in the power play, very good shooting wise, I thought there was going to be a lot more there. Even if the Western Conference was a bit more weaker, I would say that it's surprising to me that they haven't been able to show up in the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, again, we talk about it more in hockey than any other sport, right? Because it happens a lot more in hockey. Teams can come back from 3-0 and still win a championship. I'm not saying the Oilers are going to do that. I think Florida has a pretty good firm hand, and I think they're going to close things out. I would say within game 5, I think they're going to lose game 4 upcoming. But my thing is more the fact that for the Oilers to get something going, they need to spark it. They need to find that surge, like Minneker mentioned with the day off, and they need to find it now, because otherwise, you're just going to sit there with no momentum, no emotion, and completely deflated. And in a year where we're talking about all the spectacular, right, postseason battles, how great the NHL postseason has been in terms of watching, for it to be a one-sided championship series, I'm not saying it's that it needs to be the best for TV, but it doesn't tell the story that this season has told, which is why I still believe the Oilers, if they can find something, they will prove it again. I mentioned the last episode for a reason. They have 2 of the best skaters out there on the ice you can ask for. But now you got to show it. And I'm eager to see what happens in game 4 upcoming, but you got to give credit to the Panthers where it is due. Any problem they've had going into this series, they have shut that up. They have played to the objective, and they're showing why right now they are the better hockey team out there on the ice.
Yeah, and I'm glad that these last 2 years, Bobrovsky is finally getting the credit he deserves as one of the best netminders, if not the best in the NHL. He has made some flashy plays. Games 1 and 2, he had that one save where he kind of had to go into a split to deny Nugent Hopkins, who had a breakaway. It's been really, really impressive from him. But I think it's so interesting to just look at shifting over to the NBA. The NHL and NBA finals right now have so many parallels, and it goes beyond the fact that an Eastern Conference team that recently lost a championship is up 3-0. Edmonton and Dallas have so many similarities. They're both teams that have some of the most powerful, loud, excited fan bases in their respective leagues. They both have arguably the best player in their respective league, and Connor McDavid for Edmonton, Luka Doncic for Dallas, and both of them have been a little bit sloppy in their first finals. Both of them also have a number 2 in Jamie Draisaitl and Kyrie Irving, and what have we seen with both of them? They have really underperformed in these finals after being great the whole postseason run. So we're seeing that as well, and it just really feels like these are both clubs that are going to win championships at some point. Connor McDavid is going to hoist the Stanley Cup. Luka Doncic almost certainly is going to win a championship at some point, and we're just not seeing it. And connecting back to your point, Tim, you talk about how these playoffs for the NHL, this final is not telling the full story because it was so exciting. The NBA has been the same way. Because, we all knew the Celtics were probably the best team, but we've talked about how much parity there is in this sport right now. And we thought Dallas was going to put up a fight. They played way tougher competition to get to this stage than the Celtics did, and they've done nothing with that. So, it's disappointing. It's still been a great postseason, but sad to see for both the NBA and the NHL that the finals aren't necessarily living up to the hype. And game 4 coming up tonight, maybe the Mavs steal one to avoid the sweep. I'm not going to, be too upset with the Mavs. I think they're going to be back at it at some point. Remember, LeBron got swept his first time in the NBA Finals by the Dallas Mavericks. I think Luka Doncic will certainly be back at some point. But to think that this group with Luka and Kyrie runs through the West, runs past Minnesota, gets to this stage, and just falls flat, first of all, credit to Boston. But I think we all expected more, Tim.
Yeah, indeed. Let me mention this too, because compared to the NHL side, where the NBA side has a little bit of a downfall, and unfortunately history not being on the Mavs side, Eddie, is when you have an injury that changes the whole series. What happened to Luka Doncic in game 1 reminds me of the LeBron James cramping in game 6 against the Spurs, but the Spurs ultimately go on to win the championship. You think about what happened with the Golden State Warriors back against Toronto, right? Where the Raptors end up winning the championship after, Klay Thompson tears his ACL. And, oh my goodness, who was the other injury? There was another injury as well. Was it Draymond? I believe
Yes.
throughout. It was Draymond as well who had the other injury, and that changed the flow of the series. I even go back to the 50s, right? Where Bill Russell ends up having a serious sprain, and that completely altered the series. The Celtics, right? We're talking about them in the NBA Finals. Let's not forget when Kendrick Perkins got hurt, and then the Lakers turn around and they end up winning a championship back in, was it 2010, I think, at that point. So the point is this, is that injuries in basketball are a lot more impactful because, I mean, hockey, you have your superstars, right? But you have a core unit of 5 on the ice that, as a line, can find productivity regardless if you're a star or not.
Well, also hockey, I just want to say, you also have guys who will just play through just about anything. Minneker,
Right.
what was it? Truba was like on a broken ankle, like the whole postseason.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. He like a chunk of his ankle was taken out or something like that, and he was playing on it. I don't know. That was strange.
but we see that all the time. That's the thing. Like the NBA, I'm not saying the NBA players are soft by any means. Well, sometimes they are, but you know, hockey, you're able to withstand those, which is why, Tim, to your point, NBA injuries are so much more costly.
No, indeed, they're more costly. Another person too, I just thought in my head, too, Kyrie Irving. That's another great example, right? He had it happen to himself. So it's more the fact that just in the NBA, it's a bad history because when your superstars get hurt, it's impactful when it matters. And what stinks, in what we talked about last episode for the Mavs before the series began, what has been great about the Mavs this season is that it didn't matter who it was, somebody would step up when it matters. But in an NBA Finals, where it's a game about superstars and a game about that big moment stepping up, the Mavs haven't been able to do that because they just simply haven't been healthy enough. And when I look at what Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are on that opposite side, they are healthy players who play to a very elite level. And again, we talked about the size disadvantage as much for the Mavs. When you have size and you're healthy in the NBA, that goes a long way. And whereas I still feel that you're going to see a win on the NHL side, I feel like this series is going to end up closing out with a straight sweep for Boston because it's been set since the start of the season. They are the best team. They are the most motivated team. They have what it takes to win a championship. They just need to do it. And I think it makes a huge, huge statement if you sweep the Mavs here tonight to end up finding themselves with that championship that they've been desperately, desperately looking for a while now.
Ryan, your thoughts? You think Celtics close it out tonight?
Just looking on just how the series is 3-0 and everything. I don't know too much about basketball, but from what I've heard is Celtics have a good chance of closing it out tonight. I mean, I'd be astonished if that game goes even 6, like that series goes 6. So I'm gonna say if they close it out tonight, everyone expected that. If it takes 5 games, it makes sense.
I will say the extender, Scott Foster, is the main official tonight, and he has a history of making sure that series do not end up in sweeps. So we'll see how it goes. The other NBA news that we have to touch on is what's gone on with the Los Angeles Lakers. And we are in the middle of June. They still don't have a coach. They got eliminated from the playoffs almost 2 months ago. They out of nowhere try to get Danny Hurley, who has been extremely vocal that he wants to stay at UConn.
Did his contract out yet, by the way? I don't mean to interrupt, but for what he's going to do to stay at UConn, do you know how much more they're going to pay him as compared to what the Lakers were? Because I don't know yet, and I'm very intrigued to see.
I am curious to see. What I have heard is that supposedly it might be 9 figures. He might get up to 100 mil because
my goodness,
they want him. They want him to stay, and he clearly wants to stay there. And I give him credit. And this is coming from someone who goes to Rutgers, and Danny Hurley is not liked at Rutgers at all. He was an assistant coach at Rutgers, wanted the head coaching job. They hired Mike Rice, who wanted to keep him as an assistant, and resigned that night. And he has been very anti-Rutgers ever since. That being said, he's a crazy guy, but he is an incredible coach, and I give him credit for wanting to stay in a situation where he has full control, can make money, and win championships, instead of going to the NBA where he is easily going to be the scapegoat. Like Frank Vogel walked into that Lakers job. I think did a pretty good job, won a championship. They get rid of him within 2 years. Darvin Ham, his rotations were weird this year. He was not all that bad. He's canned in 2 years. Danny Hurley would be following the footsteps of John Calipari and Rick Pitino and other college coaches who have gone to the NBA and just fallen flat. And I give him all the credit to say, you know what? I'm going to stay in a more stable situation where I can actually control things and actually coach instead of having to be a mouthpiece while LeBron James coaches and make sure his son gets playing time. I would not want to be in that situation if I'm any coach, especially if I'm Danny Hurley, who might be the most talented basketball coach, period, right now, outside of Greg Popovich. So I give him all the kudos to, stay there. I like that decision. And Tim, I mean, the Lakers, I don't know what they do here. JJ Redick they want, Sam Cassell. Maybe we'll go back to the 60s.
Tear it apart. Tear it
I know.
apart. Like, it's at a point now where we've been talking about this since after the pandemic of what's happened to the Lakers. And yes, for the record, it's fair to say, right, they've gotten a little bit better around the hump over the stretch of the last 2 years. But at the end of the day, I mean, figure it out. It feels like it's circus. It literally feels like it's a circus in LA. And I get it. LeBron is the biggest star. But I didn't feel like this about LeBron when he was in Cleveland. I didn't feel like this about LeBron when he was in Miami. I'm not centering and saying LeBron's the whole reason for all this chaos, because again, just like, for example, like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, right? When you look at somebody, they control an organization, whether you like it or not, because they are the best, what the league has to offer. But, I mean, when you have two of the best, I mean, of course, you have the best player in the world. I don't care what anybody says. LeBron's the best player in the world. And you have Anthony Davis. You should constantly be seeing success. But yet the Lakers are not. They are not that. They're struggling. And it gets to a point where, just like when I talk about the Yankees, right? Granted, they're always above 500 in the mix. In the past, and Raheel talked about this multiple times too, it becomes insanity when you try the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result, yet see the same results. Even since before LeBron James was a Laker, they were a below 500 organization, not really in the cusp of anything. And then, right, the year the pandemic happened, they were the best team in the NBA. They won a championship. And since then, has never been close to relevancy again. You have to go a different direction eventually. And for the Lakers, we've been preaching it now for what, 2-3 years on the show, Eddie? Get younger, get depth, build your team from the start, and find a way. You can get draft picks for LeBron James. You can definitely get draft picks for Anthony Davis. I don't see why the Lakers just don't start fresh. And I get it. It's a big market team. You want fans to come in. You need a superstar. I 100% get that. But the Lakers are not performing with whoever is on the court. And the fact that you can't even find a coach that's good enough to take that money and convince to take that job, it proves to you that money can't buy everything. So you need to change the culture. And the Lakers are not doing that, which is why, again, I feel they need to go back to square one and restart from the beginning if they want to become relevant again. Just like what we're seeing from teams now, like the Thunder, even teams in the NBA Finals. I mean, look at it. The Celtics started from square one. They sank for a little bit. Now they're in a championship situation through how they've drafted. And the same thing as well for the Mavs. Granted, they acquired Kyrie Irving. You look at that group from start to finish, it was slow building over years, not just what you're seeing off of one off season.
Yeah, and big market teams, I feel like, are so afraid to admit their own mistakes and go into a rebuild, which is something that just seems like such backwards thinking to me. And I don't understand, because if you're the Lakers, you're still going to get fans there. The Clippers are never going to surpass you, even though they have their own building now. The Lakers were still selling out the Staples Center every single night when their best players were Nick Young and D'Angelo Russell fighting over Iggy Azalea. I mean, they are just fine no matter who's on the roster in terms of keeping the fan support. And seriously, you only got 2 picks in this draft this year. If you waste one of them on Bronny, instead of just letting him sign and see what he can do, That is completely insane. So we'll see where it goes, but Dan Hurley made the right decision to stay away from that dumpster fire. Let's go to football, guys. So this rulings were made amidst the drama from free agency. Two of the biggest signings, Kirk Cousins going to the Falcons, Saquon Barkley going from the Giants to the Eagles. There was tampering investigations with both of those situations. The Eagles get out of it scotch-free because the NFL says there wasn't enough evidence to prove that they did something wrong. Yet the Falcons get the hammer thrown at them. 5th-round draft pick taken away, big time fines to both the GM and the organization itself. I know Tim's going to have a lot to say about this, but Ryan, I'm going to go to you first. Your thoughts on the Falcons getting the penalty here and the Eagles not?
I'm not seeing too much on why the Falcons really got the penalty. Same with the Eagles didn't get a penalty, of course. I haven't seen too much of exactly why the Falcons got the 5th round and $250,000 fine. To me, unless they release something later or I haven't seen something, it makes no sense. How you can go out and fine a team for doing something, doing the same thing as another team, and then say for one team there's no evidence, there's not enough evidence, and then for another team there's enough evidence. If they released the evidence for the Falcons and there was whoever it is, whoever the Falcons owner is, was talking to Kirk Cousins behind the scenes, it'd make more sense. But since there was really no, at least from what I've seen, no evidence that the Falcons have done wrong, and neither have the Eagles, I don't think there should be a penalty there at all.
Well, let me just step in real quick, because what I've read through and what I've understood is this. The Falcons penalty has nothing to do with pre-tampering. The problem is that over that 2-day period, and where I guess there was a misunderstanding on the Falcons end, is that during that 2-day period after Kirk Cousins, let's say he announced that he was going to come, but it wasn't public yet, of course, right? They are not allowed to contact players and start negotiating travel. That is on the players themselves, but the Falcons had somebody, whoever it was, whether it was a GM representative, whatever, talk to Kirk Cousins or other free agent signing about that. Again, I'm not saying the Falcons exactly are guilty, but that's, to my understanding, that is why they're being penalized.
Weird.
And I don't know. It's very iffy for me. And I'll say it like this, Eddie, why it's iffy for me. Because to me, at this point, if you're in a 2-day window and you're communicating with a player that you already know has established themselves, I don't see the problem, in my opinion, of negotiating travel to come send them to come officially sign the contract. I don't see the problem with that. Where I have the problem, again, and where the Eagles issue is, right, is they were accused of pre-tampering. And here's my problem with the NFL with investigations. If you were conducting an investigation, typically that means that the Philadelphia Eagles are a defendant. And what that also means is that they have something that is worth looking into and a history of looking back into. But from what I've seen based on the Philadelphia Eagles, and the reason why they were not penalized, and that is frustrating to me, is because the Eagles didn't have clear evidence of, quite frankly, anything. Not saying that they didn't do it, but they also didn't really submit sufficient evidence to prove that they even really talked to these guys. So that's where it's confusing on the Philadelphia Eagles end, because to me, if you are conducting an investigation, it's almost like going to court and saying, you are the guilty party. Now you need to prove why you are not guilty. The Eagles did not prove why they are not guilty, in my opinion, which is why I don't understand why they're not penalized and why the NFL took this investigation in the first place. If the NFL on themselves couldn't find things, sufficient enough, they should have never been looking into the Philadelphia Eagles, if you get what I'm saying, which is why this became a whole waste of time on their end. If they felt it was insufficient from the get-go, it should have never, ever came into consideration. But because they felt it was legitimate enough and the Eagles couldn't defend themselves, to me, rather than the Eagles were right or wrong, listen, Saquon Barkley was going to go there regardless. I think that's very fair to say. But at the end of the day, to me, in this scenario, you are the defending party, if you don't even have evidence enough to defend yourself, not disprove that you didn't talk to him, but no evidence at all, even of loggings and other things, to me, then you're guilty because that becomes malpractice. So I don't know. It's just it's very interesting that you could see somebody lose a 5th round pick for a clean negotiation and mistakenly negotiate travel with somebody so they can come sign their contract. But yet we're talking about somebody that wasn't signed to a team yet, wasn't even during the period. And yet, whether it's true or not, that's not the point. This team doesn't even have evidence of proving they didn't talk to this person then. So it's like, I don't know. It's very confusing, very frustrating. And another situation about the NFL, to be honest with you, during the offseason, Eddie, where we see, for example, even going back to Deflategate, where the NFL likes to step on toes and it all becomes meaningless because, congrats, a team loses a draft pick and gets a fine. But it's something down the road that, if I'm going to be honest with you, I mean, granted, we've seen the Patriots kind of do it in the past, but there's going to be teams that start exploiting rules and start stepping on toes until it makes a difference. And for the NFL, they need to start being more black and white in their understandings. Otherwise, teams are just going to try to find ways to exploit stuff. And this isn't the first time. It's only going to continue to happen. But the NFL needs to be more out there so that these teams understand what is right and what is wrong.
And I just want to say in general, the tampering crackdowns at this era of professional sports is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, you can't not think that players talk to each other all the time. Like, I'll just throw out this example. Saquon Barkley, Micah Parsons. Micah plays with the Cowboys, Saquon from the Giants to the Eagles. They both played at Penn State. You can't think that they never just talk to each other about their respective situations. You can't think that there weren't Eagles players talking to Saquon Barkley during the season. I understand when financials get involved that it becomes a little sketch, but these arguments about tampering, I always boil down to when Doc Rivers got in trouble for tampering because he talked about how Kawhi Leonard had a lot of good intangibles on ESPN when he wasn't officially a free agent yet. And all of that happened and he ended up getting like a $50,000 fine. Like, come on. It's completely ridiculous with the era of social media. Everybody's got group chats. Everybody's talking to each other. What's much worse than anything that happens in the NFL is when you look at college sports where you have coaches that are legitimately taking advantage of 18 and 19-year-old kids and offering them tons and tons of money to leave their schools during the season, and that doesn't get cracked down on. So anything to me that's happening in the NFL here, especially in this particular situation, it's meaningless. Kirk Cousins was going to the Falcons. Saquon Barkley was going to the Eagles. Whether you liked it or not, that was just what was going to happen. And whether they tampered or not, that wasn't going to change anything. And I 100% agree with you, Tim, because if teams now see, it would have been better off if the NFL didn't say anything. Now the fact that they engaged and then enabled a lot of behavior, all that does is embolden teams to do even more tampering. So it's just a lose-lose situation.
All you have to do moving forward is, if you want to do, let's say, again, I'm not saying the Eagles are guilty or not, but let's say they are guilty, right? If you don't submit sufficient evidence and you just put people around in circles, you're not going to be guilty. So you might as well tamper all you want, is my point of why, again, I don't understand the NFL direction of how they do these things, but it's frustrating because it leaves you scratching your head 90% of the time. That's what it is. I just don't get it, dude. And again, I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC East, regardless of what happens. When you look at it, I don't think Saquon Barkley, if you get what I'm saying, rather they tampered or not, it's going to make a big difference. But you also hit it on the nose. There are players always going to be talking to players. You mentioned what happens in college, which is, it's not making it right? Let's say what they do in college. But the NCAA has adjusted and transitioned in ways to where players in the past weren't allowed to make money. They were making money behind people's backs, and then there would be penalties and stuff thereon. I don't see why these bigger organizations like the NBA, like the NFL, why they can't just simply adapt with the times, which is a big struggle. Maybe, again, it's because you have older, higher up people, right, working, and they don't want to change with time, which, listen, it happens in every generation. But you're going to have to adapt eventually. And the NFL's rules protocol is out of date, in my opinion, for a lot of things behind the scenes. And they need to change with the times, which historically, let's be honest, the NFL has not done a good job of that, even going back through the whole concussion era and everything for problems.
Yeah, I mean, transparency and adaptation are two things that the NFL really lacks, but it's still somehow the best run sports league by far in America. But let's finish with one that's not run as well. That's Major League Baseball. But the Houston Astros have been running that league for the last 7 years. I mean, they've played in the ALCS every season, a couple of World Series rings. And part of that is because they have made such few mistakes. Up until last year when they decided to sign Jose Abreu, who was clearly already on the back end of his career with the White Sox, give him a lot of money. And now this year, he, I think, only has had one home run. He has a negative WAR in his whole time that he's been with the Astros, and they straight up released him. And they owe him more than $30 million. It is such a rarity now to see teams release a guy when they owe him that much money in any sport. But Ryan, I mean, when we look at this Astros team, they're 7 below 500. They're 8 games out of the West. I'm still confident they're going to make it to the playoffs, but, you know, a lot of pitcher injuries. Urquidy, Javier, both needing Tommy John surgery. Verlander's like 42 years old at this point. Altuve's getting up there. Their prospect pipeline isn't what it once was. You know, it's starting to feel like this might finally be the end of this Astros dynasty that we've seen for almost a decade.
Yeah. I agree. The Astros, I mean, they are only getting older, right? They're only getting older. I mean, Abreu, not Abreu, Altuve is still young, but releasing Jose Abreu here, besides, you know, owing him $37 million in money or whatever it is, it makes sense. He's old. I mean, he's probably useless too. I mean, what is he batting?
It's not good.
It's not good.
Buck 37. That's what I think it was when I last checked. And that was maybe, oh God, I want to say 2 days ago. So
He was optioned to the minor league in late May and then slashed in 0.99, so in 22 games. So that's not good at all, especially in the minors. I feel bad for him, but like they still owe him a lot of money just to sit on his couch. So I mean, he's like 40 something years old. He should just retire. But to get back on the end of the Astros dynasty, I definitely think it's going to come to an end. I still think that division's too weak to where they don't make the playoffs, or to where they don't not make the playoffs. They'll probably squeak in as a wild card. Maybe the Texas Rangers win the division. I don't know. They don't look too good. In that Dodgers series, they let up more than enough runs. I think Yordan Alvarez will be good for that team. Kyle Tucker, you know, the core guys that you have, but then again, you're only getting older. It depends. I don't know the contracts of some of those guys and how much money they're making over the next X amount of years. But I mean, if you're the Astros owner and you have the money to maybe go younger in some of the areas that you need. I mean, I know you have Jeremy Pena. He hasn't looked. I mean, since 2021, he hasn't been the same as, you know, his rookie year. But I mean, you know, I'll say one thing about the Astros, and they'll be in postseason form come October. So, I mean, you just don't really know. It's hard to say with that team because you know that the division's weak enough to where they'll probably make the playoffs. And then once they make the playoffs, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they did in the 162 games. It matters what they do in the next 4. So, I mean, if they make the playoffs, I think they'll go far. If they don't make the playoffs, that's a damn surprise because I think that team's still good enough to give it a chance.
Yeah, I think with Jose Abreu, what we have to remember is, and this is my true problem, at least with how the foreign pool works at Major League Baseball, and particularly with Japanese and Korean baseball and so on, is that these players don't get rights to move until they're 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And Jose Abreu, you know, I think he's 30, just turned
37. 37
right?
just looked.
So,
Yep.
so you look at it, what he did with Chicago was remarkable, right? For a while. Moves over to Houston, kind of, but we're still talking about a guy last year that had 90 RBIs. We're talking about a guy that could easily still hit 30 home runs a year. I don't know. Again, I don't really know deep in regards to if there's injuries going to the season for him or not. But you would just have to assume there's something. Because for him to get the Miguel Sano treatment, right? Go to the minors, stink there, come back, stink, and then get full on cut. I understand where the Astros made their investment, right? And it makes sense. You got a guy that looked like to be the answer. But unfortunately for the Houston Astros this year, it's the pitching staff has not been there, has not been productive. You're still producing runs and scoring, but health has been a concern, other things. And really, to be honest with you, not just about Jose Abreu, because listen, I think that he can be a contributor for any team that's in the playoff hunt moving forward that feels they need a powerhouse first baseman that brings a big bat. Because I truthfully do still believe Jose Abreu can be that, even with the struggles this year. However, when I look at the Astros, I think about the Buffalo Bills, which I know sounds crazy because the Astros have championships, the Bills don't. But look what happened this last offseason for the Bills, right? You traded away your best wide receiver. You did all these things. It's very clear that the Buffalo Bills are starting to go in a direction where they're taking away assets, trading back in drafts, right? Which again, MLB doesn't have that. But they made a decision that they're starting to look in the future direction to try to look at the future of their team to build around Josh Allen. What I'm saying for the Houston Astros is you need to look and say, who are my core guys? Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, so on. Let's say even if they choose one. The point is this for Houston. Do you believe, like the Cardinals last year, the Mets, that this struggle is a fluke if you don't make the playoffs? It's a one-year thing. Do you believe that if you come back next year, you're going to be a World Series contender again? Or do you believe this is the beginning of the end? Because if you do believe this is the beginning of the end of what was a great run, well, then I would start trading pieces away. Keep my core A and B value there and start building around a new generation of an Astros team and start building again. I know in Major League Baseball, the draft goes a long way. The Astros, how they built their dominant run was based off the draft, especially going back with guys like George Springer. But eventually, you're going to have to make a change and adapt. So really what I'm eager to see, Eddie, to be honest with you, over the next 2-3 weeks, of course, Abreu is the first one to go, but it's not virtue of a trade. I'm eager to see the Astros decision-making. You don't have the same GM there anymore. You got to remember that as well. You've got to get a certain sense of direction. And if they truthfully do believe this is the end for this group, I expect there to be a very active trade market because I'll tell you right now, I talk about it with the Yankees, right, of how much of a dream it would be for them to get Nolan Arenado, although it's not realistic, even though when we were doing the last episode, right, the Cardinals were on the top of the NL Central. Now I think they're literally dead last in the NL Central because that's how tight that division is. I'm sorry, not top, but second, top third wild card that is. Of course, the Brewers are above 500. But the point is, there's still a battle. I don't think there's a single baseball team in the face of this earth that would not go trade for somebody like Alex Bregman. And even as much as Yankee fans may hate Jose Altuve, I don't think there's a single Yankees fan that even right after an extension for Altuve wouldn't want to see somebody that can bat 300 and steal 20 bases and maybe hit 20, 30 home runs either. And again, I'm not saying just the Yankees, but my point is that I don't think there's a single team in baseball that wouldn't want these guys. So I'm eager to see what happens, but I agree with you, Eddie. I think it's the beginning of the end in Houston, and it's unfortunate because I thought they were going to win the World Series again this year, but age happens, things happen, so we'll see what happens for them moving forward.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bills. One team to me I parallel this with is the Chicago Cubs a few years ago, who, while the Astros had more success than the Cubs were clear World Series contenders for about 5 years. The COVID season, they showed their flaws. Yes, it was a 60-game season, but if you lose to the Marlins in the playoffs, it's pretty evident that you've got some problems developing. And what happens the following year? They're still decently competitive, yet they made the pivot, traded away Rizzo, traded away Baez, traded away Bryant. And in the end, it kind of worked out for them. I mean, I know this year hasn't been great for them, but they got out from under those contracts. And frankly, none of those guys are really performing now. Rizzo The Yankees botched him by not diagnosing his concussion. Javier Baez is awful, and Chris Bryant is kind of unknown and just plays
I
in
kind of forgot he's
Colorado.
still in the league
Yeah.
ever since the Rockies contract.
Mhm.
No one, not even play baseball.
And that's someone who won an MVP and a Rookie of the Year, and he's just completely vanished. But my point is the Cubs made the right decision to pivot even when there was still a window for them to contend. And now we go 2-3 years later, they have a leading candidate for Cy Young and for Rookie of the Year. They've made some good moves and they've had some great prospects come up. And all of a sudden they've retooled pretty quickly, and good organizations can do that, which is why I look at the Houston Astros. I'm confident this organization's good. They were great in the 80s. They made it to the World Series in 2005, had a couple really bad years, but they've been great for 10. Might be time, try to pivot. Altuve and Bregman, like Baez, Bryant, and Rizzo in 2021, still effective, but we don't know how much longer they will be. Take advantage of the stock they have now to maybe make that trade, get some new pieces, get out from under those contracts before they become albatrosses like Jose Abreu's just was, and now you just had to eat $30 million. So we'll see what the Astros do. I want to finish before we sign off with just one thing that really annoyed me this week. I got Citi Field behind me, watched the Mets play the Phillies in London. Nice to see them split that series. But that pregame show was ridiculous. I mean, you've got Alex Rodriguez and Derek Jeter on the field at Yankee Stadium for an hour before a game in London, and you got to watch David Ortiz run around the base paths at Yankee Stadium. I know the Yankees and Dodgers were playing later. It wasn't until 7 o'clock. It was 7 hours later. Mets fans, Phillies fans do not want to be hearing from Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez before the game. If you care so much about the Yankees, send them to London. Have them play in the London game.
But who did it first? Who did the London game first? It was the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Yes,
Was it not?
it was. But if you're going to have the Mets and Phillies there, have some people, have at least one
Yeah, where's
person.
Carlos Beltran at? They should have brought Carlos Beltran, man.
I'd be fine with that. Or at least do the pregame show from London. Not these guys on the field at Yankee Stadium. It's so ridiculous the way they marketed this Yankees-Dodgers series. It's a regular season baseball series at the end of the day. I know both teams are good, but you're advertising it for 7 hours before the game? I mean, my goodness. You've got this London series that's supposed to be such a big deal, yet you're upstaging it with having Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez on the field, and the stupid thing where David Ortiz did a home run trot around the whole field. I mean, we get it. We know they've won a bunch of championships. We don't want to hear about it. If you want to talk about them so much, then put that game first.
Well, hold on, Eddie. Eddie, I want you to think about this for a second. Who's the company producing that?
I know. Fox Sports.
And exactly. That's
exactly.
all.
Yes. That is why I have problems with a lot of things from Fox Sports besides their NFL coverage. They do a good job with the NFL. Everything else. Yep. Exactly.
They have great NASCAR coverage.
I
amazing.
know. Impeccable. And they're going to have great coverage of the Indy 500.
Oh,
too.
man.
I can't
wait to see a lot of the track.
I know. We're going to see a lot of kids too. I can't wait to see the thing that Hoffman tweeted, which is hilarious. When they make the mistake next year and they accidentally put like the NASCAR ticker up during IndyCar, and like in the middle of the race, it shows like Christopher Bell is winning at Long Beach.
Hell yeah.
They're going to do that. But that'll be it for this episode of Sports Speak Live, episode 178. Again, powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word. We'll be back next week. By that point, NHL and NBA seasons will be wrapped up, and baseball moving into the halfway mark. But I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off here of Sports Speak Live. Thanks to Ryan Minneker for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.